Hi, dear friends. Some words of Torah for Parshat Pinchas. Alexander Jannaeus, or Yanai, as he's identified in the Talmud, was the king of the Jewish people during the 1st century BCE, continuing the second generation of the Hasmonean dynasty. He was married to Queen Shalom Tzion, the sister of the rabbinic sage Shimon ben Shetach. Nonetheless, Yanai had it out for the rabbis of his time. You see, this was when a great schism within the Jewish community began with the division between the Sadducees and the Pharisees. In addition to the Sadducees rejecting the oral tradition, they also sided with Yanai in declaring him a kosher Kohen, fit to be the Kohen Gadol. The Pharisees, however, had received word that Yanai's mother was not fit to marry a Kohen, and that Yanai himself was not a kosher Kohen. They beseeched him to remain king, but to relinquish his role as the high priest. This angered Yanai to the point where he not only sided with the Sadducees religiously, but also persecuted the Pharisees, executing many of the rabbis and exiling the rest, including his own brother-in-law. Eventually, Yanai allowed many of the rabbis to return from exile, but he was always wary of those who would seek revenge against him. The Gemara records a conversation Yanai once had with his wife. He said, "Do not fear the reprisals from either the Pharisees or the non-Pharisees. Rather fear those fakers who look like Pharisees but are really not. They act like Zimri and expect the reward of Pinchas." Now, as Rashi explains, Yanai knew that although they hated him, the real rabbis, the Pharisees, would not commit violent acts of revenge. He also knew that the non-Pharisees had nothing against him. He was only fearful of people who talked the talk but didn't walk the walk. Some people were outwardly Pharisaic in their dress and verbal piety, but inwardly were quite corrupt. Yanai knew that these men were capable of violence, so warned his wife to stay away from the fakers. Yanai utilized an analogy in warning his wife. Zimri is the villain of our story in Parshat Pinchas. The Torah relates how the Jews came to a Midianite encampment, and the Midianite women seduced Jewish men to sin. God became angry and brought a plague upon the people. Moshe ordered that these Jewish men be arrested and judged. But Zimri, wishing to defend his comrades, flagrantly took a Midianite princess and paraded her in front of Moshe and the leaders, flouting them. Upon witnessing this, Pinchas killed both Zimri and the princess and succeeded in staying the plague. By telling his wife that these men were like Zimri, but wanted to be rewarded like Pinchas, Yanai was speaking ironically. Zimri committed his sin publicly, but these fake Pharisees sin privately and pretend that they are the Pinchas of the story. Just like Pinchas acted violently in order to stay the plague, these fakers will pretend to seek violence to quell God's wrath, when in reality they have no fear of God. It further seems to me that Yanai chose Zimri in his analogy for a very deliberate reason. Zimri did not view himself as the villain of the story. In fact, he believed he was acting with valor, and may have even known that what he was doing could be dangerous, but he was willing to martyr himself. The Gemara records that Zimri's tribesmen came to him in a panic once they heard that they were to be arrested and tried for their sins with the Midianite women. Zimri felt a duty to protect his kinsmen, and so went to challenge Moshe's ruling. What's wrong with these men taking Midianite women? You yourself, Moshe, took a woman from Midian. No one's ordering you arrested and executed. Now, even though his argument was warped, Moshe's wife Tzipporah, after all, was married to Moshe, whereas these men were consorting with prostitutes and worshiping their idols. Nonetheless, Zimri hoped that he would be able to prevent a large number of Jews from being tried and punished. Zimri was the type of person who felt compassion for his fellow man, and even though he knew that what his fellow tribesmen were doing was wrong, he still wanted to defend them and prevent their punishment. I believe that Yanai was telling his wife that not only are these fake Pharisees dangerous because they're capable of terrible things, they are so twisted in their thinking that they've been able to justify just about every terrible behavior. They don't realize that they're the fakers. They think that they're the real deal, that they're truly frum Pharisees, doing God's bidding by committing flagrant acts that go against the Torah. We live in a world today where just about every behavior has been justified and piously flouted in public. It is we who are the sinners if we question the current political correctness and wokeness of our society. It's worthwhile to read Parshas Pinchas once a year just to remind ourselves that when we think about how distant our society is in so many ways from the Torah, we can't just shrug it off. We have to remind ourselves that despite the righteous stance that these woke people take, they are no different from Zimri, who truly believed he was on the side of the goodness and the right, even when trying to defend the most heinous of behaviors. We watch the news and see righteous indignation against Israel for going into Jenin and cleaning up a hornet's nest of terrorists. The BBC interviewer flagrantly stated to former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, Israeli forces are happy to kill children because two of the terrorists were still teenagers. It's this kind of self-righteous posturing which gives that reporter the Yanai Award for acting like Zimri and expecting the reward of Pinchas. But it goes far beyond anti-Semitism. The whole woke transgender phenomenon, where parents are being allowed to help prepubescent children who question their gender identity before they've even learned to formulate any kind of critical thinking. They take their own children and surgically mutilate them and subject them to harmful hormonal treatment that will render them sterile when they become adults. How barbaric have we descended as a society? And yet, when you ask those parents who the bad guys are, it's us, the transphobic people who wish to take away their rights. The following is becoming the new normal. A congregant will call me to tell me that their ailing parent is shortly going to die, and that they've scheduled the funeral for such and such a date. The majority of the family is not religious, and seeing how their parents' quality of life has declined so much, they've decided to exercise their Canadian right to MAID, medical assistance in dying, which is the sanitized term for mercy killing or homicide. Sometimes I can try and reason with the person who's about to allow their parent to be killed, but other times the call is simply to let me know when the funeral will be, and there's no room for discussion. I can only offer my condolences and cry on the inside. No one is suggesting that we act like Pinchas. In fact, as we've mentioned in previous years, some commentaries opine that while God endorsed Pinchas's act of killing Zimri after the fact, there could have been another less violent solution to this very difficult situation. What we are suggesting is that every once in a while, we need to lift ourselves up from our stupor, look out upon the world critically, and simply remind ourselves, no, I will not go along with this olam hafuch, this upside-down world, no matter how much it is prettied up by the media and the politicians. This is very, very wrong. We need to continue voicing our opposition to the truly bad things that are happening all around us. If we don't, then the Zimris of the story will win, and the plague will, God forbid, consume us all. And so, dear friends, may we live to see sanity restored to civilization. Let's try to be part of the solution, even if it means bucking current trends. May our efforts bear the fruit of the reward of Pinchas, the eternal blessing of peace. May we see it, dear friends. Bimheira b'yameinu amen. Here's wishing you a meaningful period of the Bein HaMitzarim. Shabbat Shalom. Good Shabbos.